I'm going to tell you just what is comprehensible input when we're talking about second language acquisition. Let's get right into it. So maybe you've been hearing about comprehensible input or CI in your PLCs or online as you're scrolling through your Twitter feed or Facebook feed, and you're not sure exactly what it is or what it looks like in a classroom. In this video, we're going to talk about what is CI when we're talking about second language acquisition and what it can look like as you're spending time teaching your students. First and foremost, the thing that we really need to get clear is that comprehensible input is not a teaching method. There are many methods and strategies you can use to give comprehensible input to your students, but comprehensible input is not a method or a strategy in and of itself. Comprehensible input is a message in the target language that the learners understand. And it seems to me that when people say they're switching to teaching with CI, they really mean that they're switching to teaching with an emphasis on delivering CI to their students. So maybe before they had some other strategies in mind, or they were doing other things, and now they realize oh, CI is really important for our students. We really need to make sure that they're getting a ton of input that they can understand in order to acquire the language. So I'm going to focus my energy and my strategies on that. That's not to say that a teacher who uses grammar-based curriculum doesn't use CI. In fact, I would argue that every language teacher ever on the face of the earth has used CI, or delivered CI, I should say, to their students at some point in time. Students read a piece of text and understand it, CI. Students watch a video in the target language and they understand it, CI. Students listen to a clip or a piece of music or something and they understand it, that's also CI. Looking at an infographic, pulling out pieces of a newspaper article, all of these things can provide comprehensible input to students. The teacher spoke in the target language and the students understood it, comprehensible input. Everyone has done this at some point in time in their teaching career, or things really aren't going well, right? Okay, now that we have the basics, it's time to step it up a notch. And if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you give it a thumbs up down below. Just because your students are understanding does not mean that they are acquiring the input to their full potential, because not all input is created equally, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. Have you ever watched an old video, maybe from a textbook series, and you just thought, oh my gosh, I cannot show this to my students? Or maybe you watch it because it is so cringy and terrible that you just everybody laughs and they're into it because it's so bad. That is a great example of a source of input that isn't as good as it could be. So in order for comprehensible input to work to its full potential, it needs to be interesting for our students. You want to make sure that the input that you're providing your students is not only comprehensible, it is interesting, compelling, engaging, right? Something that they want to watch or listen to or discuss, right? Not something that they're going to look at and be like,
makes the snap, and
So in order for CI to work its magic, there are a few things we need to keep in mind. Right? We already talked about how it needs to be comprehensible, right? If they're not understanding it, they're not getting anything from the input. We also already talked about how it needs to be engaging. If the students aren't listening to it or aren't participating in it, they're not really soaking that input in. The input should also be repetitive. And I know you might be thinking, hey, Ashley, you just said it needed to be interesting, engaging, and compelling. You're telling me it's going to be repetitive. That to me sounds boring. And I don't mean repetitive, we're going to do it again, we're going to listen to the same thing over and over and over again. It means that they should be getting repeated exposure to the words or phrases or structures that you want them to acquire. You can't expect them to see or hear something one time and then get it in their brains, right? Most of us don't function that way. We need to see or hear something more than once. Finally, it serves your students well to focus on some of that high-frequency vocabulary or high-frequency verbs and structures that they're going to lean on over and over and over again as they're trying to communicate in the target language. Narrow the focus, but spend a lot of time on those few structures and vocabulary words and phrases, and you'll see your students grow in being able to communicate in those areas that really matter to them. If you're not sure how to go about narrowing your focus in a unit, I highly recommend checking out the blog post, The Chuck It Bucket from Carrie. I'll make sure to link to it in the description below to help you kind of narrow down what really matters to your students. Okay, let's recap. 1, comprehensible input is not a teaching method or a strategy. Instead, it's something you can deliver to your students through a variety of teaching methods and strategies. 2, not all input is created equal. And 3, I want you to really think about going deep in what you focus on rather than wide and covering a broad span of topics. Feeling comfortable with this? I'd love to help you incorporating more CI into your classes. I have a recommendation for you. My video on daily routines. Daily routines were an absolute lifesaver for me when I started to focus on delivering more comprehensible input to my students. This playlist shares some of my favorite routines and details for how to get started, plus resources to support you. I'd also love to know what questions you have after watching the video, or if you feel like I left any information out, or what are you wondering after watching? Please comment below and let me know. I was also considering turning this into a series on comprehensible input and talking about some activities you can use to deliver comprehensible input to your students, or maybe a video on teaching with the textbook while focusing on delivering CI to your students. What do you think? Comment below and let me know. Do you have any questions after watching this video? And what would you like to hear about next? Can't wait to hear from you. See you in the next one.